morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Neela. My husband returned home at night and forced himself on me. It was vile, and there was no way for me to resist. I wished for the ground to swallow me up. When he moved away his body, once he was satisfied, for what felt an eternity, I curled up on my sofa and sobbed silently with pain. Nauseated, I died inside. Each and every night, I cringed at the thought of his next demand. In the darkness, without a word, he would be over me. He felt entitled to the use of my body. How I longed to be left alone. With the repeated assaults, I dreaded returning home from work. My time in the office provided a brief escape, the only respite I had. Distraught, I wanted to seek refuge. One weekend morning when he was at work, I left my home to stay with my parents, but he came to get me home. I had to return home with him to relieve my family from further distress and to hinder him from causing commotion in the neighborhood. I attempted another escape and stayed overnight at my colleague's home right after work. The next morning, he turned up at the office. To avert a nasty scene, especially in the office, I had to assure him of my return. Thus, I was compelled to stay put at home and silently endure the misery on my own. You see, forced sex on a spouse is not done out of love. It's his way of wielding power and control by taking advantage of my vulnerability. I was expected to be subservient and submit. I could not physically fight back, for I feared for my life and more beatings. Women have rights to their own body, regardless of whether they are married. There needs to be consent for the husband to have sex. Marital rape is a violation of a woman's body, causing psychological trauma. Though I was raped by my husband a long time ago, speaking about it still draws up painful memories. You don't forget. Thank you.
I'm married to an Egyptian and I'm a Malaysian Chinese converted to Islam. So basically my husband is under a spouse visa and we have 3 kids together, aged 2, 4 and 5. My first child was born in Malaysia and she has citizenship, while the other 2 were born outside Malaysia. We have just relocated from Egypt back to Malaysia in September 2017, and during our application of spouse visa, the rules and requirement documents were a lot compared to the last time when we first applied. The main problem is that no equal standard from every state immigration office. Each officer had different requirements and have to deal with all those requirements are actually very too much, too much to handle. For example, I'll give you an example. I was being asked to get bank verification from Egypt again when I already presented the original documents to the officer. Basically, Egypt is not guaranteed, I have to, it's impossible for me to fly back, especially I have 3 kids, to take care of. Right now, 2 of my kids are still under a dependent pass, even though I have applied for their citizenship for over a year. The JBN officer told me that I have to wait 2 years for approval, but without a definite confirmation or assurance from them, they will be granted any citizen, despite of the fact that one of the parents are being Malaysian. Hence, I will go to the immigration again to try to apply PR for my kids as a backup plan. But the documents required are again a lot, okay? Even though I'm the guarantor for my kids. No clear information given, and always being asked to submit documents that are not necessary. For example, they are asking for my husband's birth certificate, despite the fact that actually we got married in Malaysia, and we have all the marriage certificates and all the stamps by the embassies and all those relevant documents. Honestly, it's really a big concern of this double standard and tedious processing if you compare it to a Malaysian man married to a foreign wife. And for a foreign husband to gain a citizenship, it would take over 10 years process. I mean the shortest, you know. So it's really very headache. So I hope the government can improve on this matter to address all the distress that we have to go through. Thank you.
For those who don't know me, I'm Indra Gandhi from Ipoh. My case is about converting my 3 children to Islam without my consent. My case has been going on for the past 10 years. Despite all the winnings from the High Court of Ipoh till Federal Court in KL, these 10 years has been a very depressing and disappointments all the way long. Till today, my youngest daughter is still missing, despite a lot of asking to be locate her, and a lot of questions are being kept silent. This basically has been very a moment where we cannot express what is going on. Why the silence is being dragged for past 10 years. I lost my daughter when she was only 11 months baby. Today she's 11 years old. I have not met her for the past 9 years, and any mother should not go through what I've been through all these years. My only hope that the new Malaysia, the new government, will start finding my daughter, and I think it's time a lot of questions to be answered. Thank you.
When I was 9 years old, I witnessed my brother's circumcision and began asking questions. That was when I found out that I was circumcised too. Unlike my brother who was 10 when he got circumcised by a doctor in a clinic, mine happened when I was just a few weeks old. It was performed by a mak bidan. According to the elders in my family, while boys are circumcised as a hygienic practice, girls are circumcised to make sure they do not grow up to be wild. Apparently, when the clitoral hood rubs against a female's inner garment, it could bring about sensual feelings which could lead to wild behavior. As I reached puberty, I experienced all the sensual feelings which female circumcision was supposed to remove. I grew up into a young woman, just like any other uncircumcised healthy woman. At 21 years old, a year after I got married, I gave birth to my first child, a girl. Young and naive, I left it to the old folks in the family to help me with the common practices. That was when I personally witnessed a female circumcision. Following the demands of the elders in the family, my former husband and I took our 2-month-old baby girl to a private clinic in Glugor, Penang. Inside the treatment room, the female doctor asked me to hold my daughter to keep her calm, while her father was asked to hold the legs spread apart, pinning her down so she didn't move much. The doctor then pulled away the labia and used a surgical blade to slit the clitoral hood. I saw a few drops of blood followed by my baby girl's cry. That was how my baby girl was circumcised. My daughter is now a 22-year-old young woman. Like me, she too did not experience any health complications following the circumcision. She is a sexually healthy female like any other uncircumcised female. Although my daughter and I did not experience any health complications following our circumcision, I've always wondered about the real purpose of female circumcision. I mean, with many circumcised Muslim females who are unmarried but sexually active, clearly female circumcision does nothing to lower a female's sex drive, nor does it protect them from committing so-called sin. Therefore, why do we continue such a meaningless tradition? But most importantly, why do we brand this tradition as a religious calling? There is no verse in the Quran which promotes female circumcision. University Al-Azhar, Sunni Islam's most prestigious institution and the Center of Islamic Learning, which studies the Quran and the Islamic law in detail, outlawed the practice of female circumcision in 2007. Even the United Nations has declared female circumcision as a practice which violates human beings' rights. Sadly, our National Fatwa Council and Ministry of Health endorses female circumcision. The Fatwa Council believes female circumcision is obligatory for all Muslim women, while the Ministry of Health allows hospitals and clinics to freely conduct the procedure. As a Muslim woman who has been circumcised, and as a mother who has had her daughter circumcised, I reject the notion that female circumcision is needed to control women's sexual urges. In fact, I would like to know, why is there even a need to control women's sexuality? God created us the way we are for a reason. If God intended females to have a lower sexual drive, He would have created us without a clitoris. Today, there are Muslims like me who no longer believe in female circumcision. Unfortunately, there are many more Muslims who still believe that female circumcision is an Islamic practice which helps to protect their daughters from committing sinful acts. I know this for a fact because many of my cousins, nephews, and nieces are still being brainwashed to get their little girls circumcised. We need to stop this meaningless practice. However, before we prohibit female circumcision, I believe the Muslims in our country should be educated and informed by the authorities, medical experts, and religious scholars. They should be informed that since female circumcision in Malaysia involves injury to the genital organs for non-medical reasons, it falls under the World Health Organization's definition of female genital mutilation. They should be educated that sexual urges cannot be suppressed by slitting the clitoral hood or the inner labia. They should be made to understand that female circumcision is an old tradition originating in Africa and not an obligatory practice of Islam. As a mother who is guilty of ignorance for putting her daughter under the blade, I urge Muslim parents to not repeat the same mistake that I did. I urge you to raise your girls well, so they are strong enough to protect themselves from committing any sinful acts. Have some faith in your child. Have some faith in yourself as a parent. Remember, you have the option not to have your daughters circumcised.
I'm not a robot. I am a domestic worker. Good morning, everyone. My name is CEDAW. It was on 2012 when I got the job as a domestic worker in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. I was excited to again, after a long hiatus and waiting in spite having experience working in the Middle East in the past. There are no words to describe my experience while working there. As a protege, my first employer was a family of Greek-Australian descent. Many would say, it's a fortune if you get lucky to have employers from Western culture, because they value human rights. But nothing is absolute, of course. I have proven it wrong. My usual routine was to start working from 6 in the morning till 12 midnight. I am the earliest to get up, but the last to snooze in. I took care of their kids, but sometimes they would hit me, and their parents, if I told them, they would just respond, okay. Since I have worked with their family, I was never given an access card to the lift and the door of their flat. I could not just leave the house for fear of being locked outside. Whenever they were out on a Sunday, granted that it's family day and my day off, they would never let me take my day off outside. I would say, the work domestic workers do are strenuous and exhausting. Sometimes my body surrenders because various work they let me do in their home, but never did they pay for a single medicine when the time I get sick. Definitely, my employers were too dependent on me. Kids, meals, kids, house. I was not only their domestic worker, but a proxy parent to their kids. Sometimes, I would keep thinking, what happens to them if domestic workers were not invented in the first place? very likely they cannot get to work. A lot of people think that our work is second, third, fourth, and maybe at the bottom class. As much as how I would like to tell them that I came here for work, but their actions say otherwise. For them, I am their helpers. For others, I am a servant. I get jealous when seeing other workers claiming for their rights, benefits, and wages. I always imagine perhaps one day we domestic workers can stand up, but I realize no laws are for us, not even some basic labor laws. We are left with a heavy heart, unheard and silent. Once we renew our contract, we are required to renew also our insurance, but during the times we are hospitalized or have a minor operations, the insurance will not compensate even half of the bill at the hospital. We still shoulder the full amount, which is very heavy for us. Because they say they will compensate us only when we are dead. Given the nature of isolated work, daily abuse like lack of rest, overwork for 16 hours and non-payment of wages, and other problems very likely arise untold. In addition, there is a culture of silence where their cases remain unreported given the lack of access to justice. All of this are causing me a lot of stress. Being recognized as servants regulates and even prohibits us from a lot of benefits all workers do enjoy. Even our rights as women are not well respected, especially our reproductive rights, especially pregnancy, which tag a disease and main reason for deportation. I hope one day we will be workers, not helpers, maids, or servants. Thank you.
When I was a child, I dreamed of being an air stewardess. Of course, you like to be an air stewardess, beautiful, flying all over the world. Most people meet people, definitely. That is what I do today also. But growing up like a girl, I had also identified with stereotypes and ideas associated with being a girl. Cooking, playing with dolls, doing girly things, etc. When I was 11 or 12 years old, I also showcased my acting talent in a role of a sister, a mother, or one of those mak-mak character in a school play. I moved to Peninsula Malaysia in the 80s when I was 19 to seek a better job opportunities and promotions. In Sarawak at the time, job opportunities was limited, and especially limited for trans women. In the early 80s, transgender women were hardly accepted for jobs when they express themselves as who they are, wearing women's attires or having long hair. If they have long hair, they have to cut their hair short like boys. By moving out of the home, I could also at least help to ease the burden of my family, who were consistently being subjected to people in my neighborhood talking about me. So at the age of 19, I left my hometown Sarawak and arrived in Peninsula Malaysia. My mom, who I love so much, cried when I told her that I want to move and find a job in Peninsula Malaysia. She was worried about my safety. When I arrived in Peninsula Malaysia, I was 19 years old. I worked in a restaurant in Johor Bahru. When I was there, I had an encounter with the police who used vulgar words and threatened to arrest me for cross-dressing. I was beaten up and raped by a police officer who arrested me. I did not know what to do. I kept on asking my own self, what have I done wrong? It took me years to overcome the trauma and still hurt me when I think about it. I did not take any action because I was worried and scared. If I lodge a report, will they take it? At the age of 21, I moved to Kuala Lumpur when I began my activism. I joined Pink Triangle in the 90s as a volunteer. I began to do outreach to the drug users, transgender women, and cisgender women, sex workers community. I had learned a lot about doing outreach. I felt sad to seeing how the community was mistreated by the healthcare providers, the police, and the religious enforcement unit. The rights were clearly violated. On a personal level, I could also identify with this experience. I had so experienced under arrest in the 90s at a wedding. I was arrested at a trans women friend's brother wedding in Alustar, Kedah, with other 50 transgender women by the religious enforcement unit who raided the wedding without any warrant. I pleaded not guilty and had to fight for 2 years in court, but I still lost at the end and was fined and 100 for cross-dressing in a public space. It was traumatizing for me during the trial and had to face a magistrate who is anti-transgender. After the incident starts the era of my advocacy on rights. In the early years in 1998, we trans women in KL decided to form up Persatuan Maknya Wilayah Persekutuan. The purpose of the setup was to understand the need of the transgender community and for us to get together to get support each other, as a lot of us were not accepted by our families. As jobs were difficult and limited for transgender women, we had to do sex work. In the late 80s, we introduced the term Maknya to create a distinction between gay men and trans women. There used to be, and still is, a lot of confusion about gender identity and trans people. Cisgender people especially are often confused, and this confusion and lack of information can be seriously harmful and result in violence, rejection, and marginalization of trans people. Being at this age and an activist doesn't spare me from discrimination. Recently, I was hospitalized due to the heart problem. I was placed in the ward with cisgender man, and every eye was watching me the minute I entered the ward. The nurse who attended to my case were initially complaining and saying that I was admitted in the wrong ward, but then when they look at my file and they smile cynically, I thought to myself, they must have read about my gender. I felt bad, humiliated, and mixed emotion, but what I can do. As a patient, I was there to seek services, and focus should be treating on me. I'm sick, I just need to rest, but all these small things make things worse and create discomfort. I felt uncomfortable when I need to go to the toilet and to the shower. Just imagine me going to the men's toilet, but I love it. But luckily the next day, a nice women doctor who was looking into my case was a bit surprised, and she asked the nurse why I was there, and she said that I should be placed in a women's ward. She immediately asked one of the nurses to call the women's ward and say that I will be transferred there. I was transferred and I feel so happy. My recovery was fast. Also, I had a lot of support from my friends visiting me while I was hospitalized. Trans people experience so many types of discrimination, violence, degrading treatment throughout our lives. In the last few years, especially, we are seeing rise in discrimination, hate speech, aggression, and violence against trans women. This year, we ushered the new year with the murder of trans women. This is another sign of rising hate crimes in relation to LGBT people. In my life, I've seen my own friends becoming victims of the hate crimes and murder. But discrimination can be changed and must be changed. I hope the younger generation of activists will not give up hope just because things are not changing the way it wants to be. Activism is a long journey. We need to create awareness of our rights to empower our communities and people to take control over themselves and know what to do. We need to build allyship with people who believe that every person has the rights. When rights are violated, we need to stand up together to voice out and to fight back. A real rights advocate will always speak out when right is violated, regardless what gender, race, religion, ethnic the person is. Thank you.